We have here tonight with us, thank you for being here. We have here with us Paulina Pukyte. She's an artist and a writer and the director of the 11th Kaunas biennial in Lithuania. It was just presented a few months ago, and that I had the great pleasure to work with in the biennial. First I want to where is Elena? Hey, Elena. Thank you, Elena. The Lithuanian Culture from the Lithuanian Culture Institute. First, for making this event possible, but also and maybe mostly for making this connection.
Yes, that's
for the
right.
first,
Yeah,
for the first place.
That's
yes. And also, I want to thank Rani, my colleague, who was also part of the Center for Digital Art for many years. Now is the curator of the artist residency in Celia, and I want also to invite you this Saturday evening for the opening of a new exhibition at his place with work by Paulina also. It will be at 8, right?
8 Saturday. Deadline is the artist residence. The artist residence a group exhibition with Paulina, and 6 other magnificent female artists.
Great. And Paulina will talk now about the biennial and the context of monuments today in Lithuania. And then we'll have some time for questions and maybe some discussion about it.
Thank you. Thanks, Udi. As Udi has mentioned, I'm an artist, not a professional curator, an artist and a writer, and I was invited as such to curate the latest edition of the Kaunas biennial. And I didn't want to do it at first, but then I decided that I'll approach it as my own artistic project. And I chose the theme of monuments for this biennial, and I will now present you a little bit with the overview of a Lithuanian situation in terms of monuments, to give you a context, and then I'll talk a little bit about some works in the biennial. As some of you probably know, most probably don't, Lithuania is celebrating its centenary this year. The modern nation-state of Lithuania, as many other nations in Europe, became independent after the First World War, and only a few weeks ago, on the 16th of February, we celebrated 200 years. And of course, the celebrations like that are always there's always talk about monuments, and in preparation, which started a few years ago, there were plans to build like hundreds of new monuments, which were all had to be bronze men of different shape and form, but which a lot of artists and cultural community found really strange and really unnecessary. And also there was a big thing made out of this square in Vilnius, which was a former Lenin Square, and now there was a lot of lobbying and pressure and everything to build something for this centenary, to build a monument to freedom there. But it was a lot of problems, and it's been going on for 20 years, trying to build this monument. It never happens, and I will talk about it. But I want to talk about this mainly the 20th century and then the beginning of the 21st century. And for Lithuania, it was a very difficult time. Lithuania changed hands during the 20th century five times. 5 times it changed hands from different, being occupied and then regaining independence and then being occupied again. And Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania and its surrounding area, changed hands 7 times in that period. So you can imagine that, ideologies changed and monuments didn't last in that situation. This I chose for the cover is the oldest monument in Vilnius, which is less than 100 years old. It's about 90 years old only, and there's nothing older than that. It's a monument to Stanislav Moniuszko, a Polish composer, who nobody bothered, removing. So he survived all the times. It was right next to my school, and it was in this little kind of little park, and it was a very convenient place to smoke behind it because it was like so it was very popular because his name was mentioned every day, many times in our school. Let's go to Moniuszko, and he lived, even though he wasn't mentioned because he was a composer, but still it was an important important figure. But so anyway, so after the 1918, Lithuania regained its independence from the Russian Empire, and all the monuments of the Russian Empire were removed, and the nation state started building their own national monuments, monument to freedom, to the important personalities who helped, bring the independence of Lithuania. When the Soviet occupation came, all the Soviets removed all these national monuments and built their own. So I will start from that. And this is in Vilnius. Incidentally, the building behind it is a big block of flats where I grew up. So these Lenin stood in every city and town. It had to be everywhere. It was either wearing a coat or a jacket, and everybody was joking. Whenever it was built, was it winter or summer? They dressed him accordingly. So that child, that's also me. by accident, and we discovered this negative only last year, so it's just strange, it's around. Of course, this you can, some of you probably know, this is a famous image of in Vilnius, in 1991, the Lenin is being removed. So after the independence of the 1990, now all the Soviet monuments went, and Lithuanians rebuilt all the national monuments from the interwar period, independence period. Not only they rebuilt those, but they started building new monuments, but somehow trying to build monuments that would have been built if we didn't have the Soviet rule. So in the same style of the same content, it continued. So this is one of the most important monuments, the Statue of Freedom in Kaunas. I will talk mostly about Vilnius and Kaunas. Vilnius is the capital of Lithuania. Kaunas is the second largest city in Lithuania. So the biennial we did in Kaunas, but I will talk about these two because these two cities most representative of this monument business. So this was, as you see, I put the dates. This built in 28, destroyed by the Soviets in 1950, rebuilt in 89. This, again, you see, built, removed, rebuilt. But so some monuments were rebuilt in the same place where they stood, like the Freedom Monument. They found exactly where it was, but for example. And I will talk about this removing, rebuilding first, because this is that's why I called it the absence and the presence, because this is the process that is quite, influences the whole thing of the monument of memory of commemoration.
But they were built exactly the same.
Well, that's the question again. The freedom statue, the actual bronze sculpture, was not destroyed. It was stored. So they rebuilt the postament, which they made slightly different, I think. Although yes, higher and something. But for example, of course they tried to rebuild what they could the same. But for example, Vytautas the Great is one of the most important rulers of Lithuania, the Battle of Grunwald and so on, 15th century. They rebuilt him as it was, but they rebuilt him in a different place. It was meant for the barracks, of the army barracks, to boost the morale. After the independence, they decided that it should stand in the main street in Kaunas. And now is regarded as politically incorrect because and a piece of propaganda, because the sculptures underneath they are a Russian, a Tatar, a Pole, and a German. It conquered, repressed, begging for mercy, even though some of them were actually the allies of Vytautas against the German crusaders. And then this artist who did research about this, he found in the archives how the generals who were commissioning this, they were giving very exact requirements how these underneath these sculptures should look, how they should be scared, their faces, the beards, everything is described how they should be looking like up, and begging for mercy and everything. So it was a total kind of commissioned piece of propaganda, but rebuilt in a different place, and it already changed the whole thing, because for the army it's okay to but to boost the morale or whatever, maybe it's in an enclosed space, but they rebuilt it here in the middle of the city. This is in Vilnius. You can see how similar it looks. So this is a Soviet general of the Red Army who liberated Vilnius, but then forgot to leave, and the Russian army stayed for another 50 years. So this was, as you see, the dates are also not of the actual person, but of the monument. And as you can see, the rebuilding happened earlier than the removal. And even though I say that the Soviet monuments were removed and the national rebuilt, but actually they were first rebuilt. The national were first rebuilt and the Soviet then were removed, because the rebuilding was started before the independence, before the 1990. But the removal was after, because and 1993 this was removed because the Russian army only left Lithuania in 93. So obviously it was safer to rebuild the national ones than to remove the Soviet ones. So,
and all the Soviets are gone?
The monuments.
Yes.
Yes, I will talk about it as well. Now, yes, except the two. There's still two monuments that are regarded controversial, and they are both to writers. To writers a female writer and a male writer who were in a delegation to go to Moscow to ask to be joined to the Soviet Union. Brought so-called Stalin's son to Lithuania, and they are monuments to them, and they still haven't been removed, and there's a lot of demands to remove them, but then the others say that these are writers. There's a separate issue, but anyway, so this was removed, and in its place, instead of rebuilding what has been there before, they built a new one. So that's another strategy. But it's also, it's built in 2009, but it's more or less the same as before, except that he's not standing on the top of it. But so in their understanding, it's something completely different, but it's not really. Now this. Again, another very strange but used strategy was to use sculptures from the pre-war period to make them big. So not to create a new one. For example, okay, we need we need a monument to King Gediminas, who was the founder of Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. Let's build a monument to him. But they used a model from the 30s to do that. And at that time they said that this is very contemporary because he is not on the horse, he's not riding it, he's off the horse. So this is very radical, very radical. Underneath there is a wolf. Everybody thinks it's a dog. And why is this dog? Why is he with a dog? And this is supposed to be the iron wolf. You know, it's the legend and so on. But the actual figure is an iron, and the wolf is not an iron. Then okay, King Mindaugas, another one. Again, this was in a competition for this. But didn't pass for King Gediminas. They went for King Mindaugas. It's alright, whatever. Nobody knows what they look like. This is another one for the same King Mindaugas. This is another participated in the competition for King Mindaugas. Didn't go through. Was gifted to Latvia. Latvia very happy because it's a gift, and that's another problem with monuments. The gifting business, because in Lithuania there is no policy how to deal with the gifts. The other countries I've heard, sorry, they have a policy that gifts have to pass still some kind of experts who can approve whether it's acceptable or not. Here, if it's in Lithuania, if it's a gift, everyone's happy, and so obviously
it's not really a gift, but a regift.
What?
We have something in Israel where years ago where you get chocolate for the holidays and somebody would re-gift it.
Regift.
And this is a regift. It's like because it was made for a different. We don't have that. You have it.
Yeah, you have
Enjoy.
it. Okay, yeah, and then well, you can't reject it because it's impolite.
Because it's made of stone.
This is a model, but that's my next one. So this is actually how it was built. So it's interesting to see because how they changed it. This is the model, and this is the actual one. And I put this on Facebook, and I was like taking the mickey out of it, and someone said, a friend of mine said, no, actually it looks like this, and obviously he went there for some reason and photographed it. So this was in the press. and you can see how they changed it, how they made the top more manly and the bottom less manly, and made the child look less than a girl and things like that. So it's interesting to see how it changes, from the. But as you see so far, everything is representative. There's almost no abstract monuments in Lithuania. This is another one. Was a big scandal competition to the monument to the patriarch of the Lithuanian nation, Basanavičius. There was a lot of argument and public kind of, but everyone was also laughing at it because they said, why didn't they leave Lenin's, just screw the head off, put another head, it looks exactly the same. Again, the same strategy, the model from the 30s, proposed again to build now. And this one, as you can see, some artists decided to make it as a joke, because the problem also with building monuments in Lithuania is that the competitions, and I think these problems are everywhere. The conditions of the competitions are sometimes so impossible that you doesn't allow any kind of any decent stuff doesn't even start to get in. So this was made as a joke. I think there is some kind of half hipster, half hippie, and everything is representational. This is the only one I found. Perhaps in the country, there's more of that kind of stuff. This is again to the Vytautas, this king, but it's abstract. But the only form of the abstract is this obelisk, which is a classical form, slightly shaped.
It's looking at the farm, no? Not in the city.
Sorry?
It's in a farm. Or
Yeah, it's into countryside. So that's
in the city,
yeah, not in the city. So in the countryside you can find abstract monuments, but they in the shape of obelisks. And I think it's not because there is a need to also make something abstract, but because it's cheaper and so they can do it with much less money. So the only few abstract monuments exist. This is in Kaunas, you've probably seen. This is one of the probably 2 or 3 only more contemporary monuments. At least this is vertical rather than horizontal rather than vertical. This is to this person who burned himself in protest against the Soviet rule. Even a decade after it was built, there are still petitions and people collect signatures to remove this and to build something high, tall. This is still, people still find this insulting. And now we move to again go back and to the removal situation, removing of monuments. These were the last examples of socialist realism in Vilnius on the Green Bridge. They were not removed in the 90s, they were removed only 2 years ago. They were not removed in the 90s because they in fact are not monuments. They are not monuments, they are sculptures, decorative, basically sculptures. But suddenly, now, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, a few years ago, suddenly there is again this urge, it became this kind of demands sprung up to remove these sculptures from the Green Bridge. And it's it's at the same time when the monument question became important again, considering what's happening in the United States, where the monuments are being removed. But for example, in the United States, the monuments are removed because they suddenly became important to the nationalists, to the ultra-nationalists, and that's why it's against the nationalism that the monuments are being removed. This is actually the opposite. This is the nationalists decided that suddenly they are wrong and they need to be removed, and because also, perhaps because of this either real or imagined new threat from Russia again, but unfortunately, so they were farmers, workers of intellectual front and army soldiers. The soldiers, of course, were controversial, but all the other 3. They removed, there were four pairs on each corner, and they removed them. And now I want to go to talk about the artists, the art side of things. In the 90s, there were quite a few projects in public spaces trying to recontextualize what's remaining from that period, rather than suggesting to remove it, suggesting to do something different with them. And this was, I think, one of the most successful piece by Gediminas Urbonas, coming or going. It was temporary piece for a project, but really everyone remembers it. And even now, in a couple of years ago, when they were removing these, again there was suggestion, let's do this, let's recreate this work and leave it like that. At least it will. But that's the problem, that there's no the art world and the bureaucracy world, they don't join, and there's 2 separate worlds, and they don't really, at least in Lithuania, it's very difficult to join them. I mean that the people who make decisions, the municipality, the government, they do not see art as
It's out.
accepting art as a solution to things like monuments, you know, to the monuments that are controversial, that some people find insulting or you know, want it removed. They don't see that artists can deal with that in a different way. So that's why the biennial that I curated, one of the goals was to suggest to different ways of dealing with monuments, you know, with existing monuments, with the former monuments, and with future monuments. So I'll show another example. There's a piece also from perhaps either from the same public space project or another one. There were a couple in that period. This is her work called Net, and this is an example of how, this is in Vilnius, in the former ghetto territory, but this is an example how an artwork which was not meant to be a monument can become it, because of how the artist's intuition and sensitivity to the space, to history, to, you know, it can create something that can become a monument. And this would have been great if it stayed there, because it really invokes, you know, the important history, moments in history. But of course, it was also only temporary, unfortunately. And this is a third example I wanted to show of how another piece by a work by an artist that wasn't even meant as art, but was meant as commissioned as an advertiser for an advertisement, became an anti-monument. That's probably the only anti-monument in Lithuania. Some of you might recognize this is the face of Lukashenko, the ruler of Belarus. And he made it into it made him into a skater, even though he was advertising Kodak, something.
Kodak, this is the store of Kodak, and this is in front of it?
Yes, it was like a photo lab, you know, and it is in front of it. Yeah, they made this. And it was vandalized many times. People hated it, and people really expressed their hatred. It was broken and vandalized in all possible ways, and then he filled it with concrete, and it still was broken. But I wanted to show it as an example how, again, there's something as anti-monument, and it also is very effective strategy.
So it's only for 5 years, because it's from 2000 to 2005?
Yes.
5 years it was standing, or what?
Now it's somewhere lying without legs.
This was, why don't you take picture of this now?
I can show you. Because we brought it to the biennial also. But now he tried to make it in bronze, you know, to recreate it. And they didn't want it. It's complicated story.
Can you say something about what it means, like, to show Lukashenko this way in Vilnius?
Well, it's just, it's an anti-monument, you know. It's I don't know how to explain. It's just a joke, you know. Not well, a joke, but it's quite. Huh? Sorry. Well, yeah, but it's in a way, you know. It's just mocking, but I think it's not just that. I think it becomes something more, because it evokes reactions from people. And yeah, it was probably made as a joke, but it became more than that, I would say.
And that is like a sort of private initiative of an artist?
Yeah. I mean, he I don't know how it worked, because they commissioned to do something to make I don't know why he chose a skater, but they commissioned him to do some kind of advertising, but he chose to make a Lukashenko face. And you know, everyone was okay, whatever, you know.
And you know, at the monument, usually people are standing very strong.
Yeah.
Falling.
Falling, yeah.
So it's
yeah. So And so now, talking about the removal again, this is the Lenin Square, the former Lenin Square, now Pukytė Square, where the Lenin that I showed at the beginning was removed from. And now it was through this past 20 years, 25 years, and especially now, there's a lot of talk about what to do with it. And a lot of the artists and all the cultural community said leave it as it is, because only by leaving it as it is you can make the point of something that was there and it's no longer there, that it's been removed, and it tells you that it's not, that it is empty now and it's gone. So the fact that it is as it is without the Lenin, you know, it emphasizes the freedom, because they want to build a statue to freedom, or to freedom fighters, or to freedom here. And so there was a lot of proposals to actually leave it as, but of course they never listened to that, because...
What is the red part? It's flowers?
Flowers, yeah.
It can be blood, or?
Yeah, but also there was one project, temporary project, where they were growing wheat or rye or something, some crops in that, and it was quite nice. Yeah, but so this is what they are proposing for there. Yeah. So there was a competition, and even there was so much lobbying from certain groups that even they pushed it through Parliament. The Parliament made some kind of resolution that this type of sculpture, man on the horse, should stand and nothing else should be there. This is a man on the horse is a symbol of Lithuanian coat of arms, but of course it's 2D, two-dimensional. And they decided that it has to be made into 3D, which makes no sense. But and there was one better than another, and even some Chinese man on some kind of strange animal, which that probably is considered really radical. This one won the competition of the man on the horse, but then there was a project to an effort to eliminate it somehow. So they succeeded. It was very difficult, but they succeeded, and this was selected instead, because they involved the Contemporary Art Center, and the Contemporary Art Center formed a jury, and then there was another thing particular to Lithuania only, I think, where they decided that the people should vote. The people's voice should decide what monument stands in this Pukytė Square, which is not really, has no precedent anywhere really. And of course the people, and there was so much propaganda about through all media and everywhere for the man on the horse, that people had no really idea what else could be there. So. But funnily enough, this other project was after the people's vote was second, and then like in Eurovision, the jury put more votes on top of that, and then it won. But this has problems, because now this is like a black wall with inscriptions and so on, and then it's like a field, and then there is criticism, because people say, well, the monument has to be some kind of space different from the everyday, and this emphasizes the everyday. Let's allow children to play on it, you know, and people have picnics and everything. But then others say, well, why is it a monument then? How is it different then from the everyday, from any other park, you know? So it's complicated, and now they wanted to do something for the 16th of February. Obviously, it failed, so I don't know what's going to happen. And so now we go to that's a context of the monuments situation, and we now come back to the biennial that I curated, that it was called There and Not There. the possibility of a monument. The 11th Congress Biennial sought to oppose conservative traditionalism and populism in the practice of removing and erecting of monuments. Huh? Slower. Sought to oppose conservative traditionalism and populism in the practice of removing and erecting of monuments in Lithuania, and to stimulate and legitimize radically new, contemporary, conceptual and relevant ideas and strategies by handing the initiative directly to artists, inviting them and us to look back at the removed monuments, rethink existing monuments and imagine new monuments. This is some of the questions that I thought were important to look at the monuments differently, and it's not as simple as to ask whether we should have a representative or an abstract monument, whether it should be vertical or horizontal, or whether it should be object or space. You know, even whether it should be passive or active. More interesting for me was whether it should be present or absent, whether a monument actually is something that is present, or can a monument be something that is actually absent. And so that idea that came from the counter-monument movement, which in Europe and elsewhere in the world has been around for several decades, but has not reached Lithuania, unfortunately. And I wanted to emphasize that those different possibilities. So I'll now show some of the works of the artists of the biennial, and the first one is by the Japanese artist Tatsunishin, and this is the freedom statue that I showed you at the beginning on the tall postament. He built a kitchen around it. And some people thought this image circulated around Facebook and social media, and some people were saying, "Why did they? We understand that they have to renovate, but why are they doing it in someone's kitchen? Why, you know?" It seemed that people thought that it's actually been removed and put into someone's kitchen, but this is actually what it was. You know, some of you perhaps know the artist's other work. He built this. Well, we built for him. This construction and this little house, and the kitchen is the late Soviet authentic kitchen that was moved from one house directly to here, and all the objects and things. This was the most controversial piece because some people were really insulted, and there was protests and petitions and letters being written. Saying that this is, you know, desecrating the sacred monument. This is, you know, this should not be allowed, and so on. The artist also did a mirror image of, like a flip side of that, where this is a Lenin that stood in Kaunas. And this is a small flat. So with the freedom statue, he built a room around it. Here he brought Lenin into a room, and we put this flat up for rent advertised this as rented. As rented.
No, I asked from what is
it's a copy. It's a copy from Sturform something. Yeah, so some kind of. Yeah. But we, of course, we wanted it to look actually he wanted the real one brought from because all our Soviet monuments are in one place in Rutas Park. They haven't been destroyed. There's a park. Where just mostly stand. So he wanted the real one, but it was too heavy and difficult to move into the space. So we made a copy. And this flat, as I said, was advertised for as rented, and people could, call, arrange to look at the property. And of course, the photographs didn't show that Lenin is there. People came to see the property, and suddenly there's a studio flat, there's a kitchen and this, and there was a very interesting reactions from people. Some said, no, well, can we move that? No, you can't, you have to have it like that. And there are some people said, there's a TV here. They said, don't want a TV, but they didn't mention that they don't want that. There were a few people who said, I don't mind. It's okay, I don't mind. I put my clothes on it, and it's all right. So, but of course, we pretended that it's been already taken, so that we can continue with this. How am I doing with time? Good. Okay. Right. Now I would like to talk about this, about a monument being there and not being there, about present and absent monuments. This, as you can see here, this hardly visible plaque is the plaque to. I'll show you. It's not only difficult to see it in its location, but it's difficult to read what it actually says. It says more or less this. It's a plaque for Jan Zwartendijk, who was an acting Dutch consul in Lithuania, in Kaunas, and he helped several thousands of Jews. He was the one who gave visas, after which everyone went to Sugihara, who is now very well known, savior of Jews, but he is not known so much. But Sugihara couldn't have done, because Sugihara only gave transit visas. He was who gave the actual visas to Curacao. But there's no monument except this plaque, which is hardly visible. But as you see, when I was researching, I noticed that, and I read, and it says that on this building, number 42, Freedom Avenue, Leicesters Allee, the Dutch consulate was until 1922. In 1940, the consulate was in 29 Freedom Avenue, where he actually issued those visas. And I thought, well, why is it on the building that had like 12 years, difference, and he was never there, never worked in that building, and it turned out that the owner of the actual 29 building didn't want it. Yes, he didn't allow the plaque to be there. So I decided to make a piece about it and to point to how to point out that the absence of monument where it actually should be. So I made this on the pavement in front of 29. I made this little plaque that tells you to look at this 42 for 42 seconds and then look up to the wall. What should happen is you should see an after image. In your eyes, it should be 42, which projects on the wall. Also, 42 has all these different meanings. As you probably know, some of these meanings you probably don't know. 42 is the answer given to the hitchhikers to the galaxy by the computer about
the question of everything.
Yeah, the question of everything. And then there's also other meanings. 42 is the angle for which we see a rainbow. So I wanted to emphasize the 42, the importance of the 42. So that's how it looks. And what it does, it makes someone stand in front of that building in a minute of silence, basically. because they are told to look at the number, and they kind of, it's a form of giving a respect to that building which has nothing on it. And as you can see, people just standing in front of it and looking down. Trouble is, you can't see the after image on this wall. So what it is that the wall rejected the plaque, but it also rejects the after image. So I made a point out to that, and I made this a press release sent to some papers to publish that the monument has actually been unveiled on the number 29, to this to Jan Svartenbeek, and that it will remain there forever as a refusal. Because in 2003 the owner of the building rejected the Kaunas municipality's request to place a commemorative plaque to the Savior of Jews. Therefore the plaque had to be placed on 22 Leicester Avenue instead. So I make a point that the monument is actually there by it not being there, so pointing out the absence of it. And the refusal, so it's the refusal becomes permanent. It's the permanently refusing. There's another, I wanted to show a different strategy. This I found it was just there. It's a cemetery wall, a Jewish cemetery wall, and it's someone repaired it, covered a hole with a spade, and I made up this artist, and this is a plaque to the artist's father. The father is, we don't know. The name is I took from my mother, but that name doesn't exist anymore because the name has been changed. My mother's name has been changed, and her father disappeared in Kaunas, and we don't know where and how he died during the Holocaust. So this is to something that is unknown, and the place is unknown, and the artist doesn't exist. So that's how it looks. This is just a quote from Mansabaic, who also contributed to the biennial, about how the artist, the artist can influence these things, to act as an intruder. So it's also one of the strategies I wanted to propose, to be intruders in this whole system. I would now like to show a couple of extracts from this film, which documents the biennial. So another two or three pieces, if we have another 10 minutes, yeah? Mm-hmm. There you go. We can start from here. This is a piece by South African artist, composer Philip Miller. And perhaps I would like to mention this because we had a big disagreement with him, me as a curator and he as an artist, because I explained to him the idea that I want the work to communicate in this exhibition, the absence side of things, pointing out to some absence of something. And he just didn't want to accept that, and he said that this is being too passive and too quiet, and we have to make a point loud and clear, and the next work which I did myself, I wanted to involve him, and he said that if there is a Yiddish language, it has to be a translation, people have to understand, and I said no, they don't have to understand. They have to understand that they cannot understand it anymore, because it's been lost. So they have to understand that they lost it, not that, okay, this is the translation. So that's how we disagreed on things, but I'll show you, start with this and then we move to sound.
No.
What do we use?
The sound in the battery is okay. It's not connected to me. It's coming from the computer somehow.
Yeah, it's coming from it. Let me see, where is this? Is it? No.
Yes, no, but it's some kind of property. לא, זה הגדרה של... אתה יודע? אז מה אתה חושב?
And there is some visits.
HDMI can transfer video and audio, but you have to tell him how to do that. And to also.
Okay. Do you want to? What do you want? It doesn't go full screen because it's okay. No, but will it be sound now? Just move it slightly. Okay, then I'll just move it slightly back. Yeah. So this he installed. We installed his. Yiddish and Lithuanian speaking and singing. It was in the letterboxes. The sound was coming from the letterboxes in several places. Okay, and this is now the work I did in the Democrat Square, where the big action took place in the Kaunas ghetto. There is no monument there to mark the event. Can you?
You jump to forward.
Can you read, or should I read when there's a text, or should I leave it to everyone?
Okay.
It's okay, yeah? Okay, sorry.
Solita zona svinata
She understood what she's saying?
Yes. They worked with this woman, Bella Shirin, yes, who came from back to live in Lithuania from Israel, and she taught them how to pronounce, and they knew the translation and everything. I want to speak a little bit about the public reaction. So this was this one singer. There were 4 of them, but they changed. They came every day. Midday, 12 o'clock, to sing for 2.5 months. They were coming every day there exactly at the same time. And when they started singing, it was so unexpected. People were mocking it. They would start singing, and these local drunks, they started shouting. They would shout, oh, they would mock, the singing, because it was so out of place, perhaps, or something, and it was, yeah. But then he stopped, and then you see these 2. They come and they stop each other, and they kind of do some kind of
gesture.
Yeah, a gesture. They do the cross and everything, So by then people started kind of, and also there's a lot of people. Quite a few people came to ask what it is, and some old people, and they said, "Why is it singing to nobody? Is it no filming, no nothing? And what is going on?" And when we told them, the people started remembering and speaking about what was there. Yes, I remember the ruin that was here, and it was terrible, and people started talking. And there was one, there's quite a few drunks, it's a horrible place, really, very dirty, and the one guy came with a dog, old, and he said, yes, I drink a lot and everything, but my dog now perks up his eyes every time just before 12. And so the point I also wanted to make with this work, that when it stopped after 2.5 months, it stopped, and there was no more. But it was so regular every day at exactly the same time, that I think that it was missed after it stopped. So people must have expected it, and suddenly there isn't. It's not there anymore. So so it's just about creating this, evoking this understanding that something is there and something is not there.
But when people were aware that it was part of the biennial, do you have any kind of information?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there was we had these booklets, these guides, where those visitors to the biennial, they knew that there is this work that they can come and see. But the locals, of course, they didn't, and I specifically didn't want to put any kind of plaque or something or information, that they stand. I wanted it to be just like that, you know, just.
But how they get there? There is a bus or something to get there? You can get.
Yes. Sorry.
You have to come with a car or with a bus. There is a bus.
Yeah, there is a bus. Yeah, it's outside. It's a suburb of Kaunas.
Yes.
Part of Kaunas, really.
So people go there if they know that it's not a good neighborhood, they come to see?
For the biennial, yes.
Yeah, for the biennial.
Yes, people came to see
Yes.
for the biennial, yes. But that's the thing, it brought people there for the biennial because people even who live in Kaunas, they didn't know this is across the river, this Slobodka, which was the ghetto. People don't go there, they don't know, and even people who live there, they don't know, a lot of people, that is the part of the ghetto. So that's why I wanted them to sing in a language that they don't understand, because they understand that there is something, you know, if they sang in Lithuania, it's just someone singing, you know, but if they sang in a language which people don't understand, then they ask, yes. So, and now.
By the way, there was a walk. There was the walk in the convenience store.
Yeah, now we talk about that. That's there was another. Now we'll go to the piece by another artist in the same place, by Jenny Kagan, whose parents were in Kaunas ghetto and they escaped. And she did a piece about the big action, and she involved the kids of the local school, which is just here next door. There is a school, and she involved the kids. What shall I first show and then talk, or first talk and then show?
Show.
So, as you maybe understood, maybe not from this piece, she introduced shopping bags into that shop. Instead of their own bags, they were the exact amount of 30,000 bags. Some of them said to the left and some said to the right. 9,200 said to the left. And the rest were to the right. So people who shopped there were given randomly either left or right. So she kind of intervened into this everyday ritual of shopping, and every time you become the fate decides, your fate by accident is your fate is decided. And she involved the local kids who wrote all the numbers. So she, for 2 weeks, she had groups of kids, every class, everybody participated. for an hour writing the numbers. So every bag was individual because it all had the number written of either from 1 to 9,200 or from 9 to 17,430. Which survived. So most of the kids live in the area, and she had a map of the ghetto, and they put the flags where they live, and most of them were, and they didn't know, their parents didn't know that this was a ghetto, you know. So it was a lot of information, and of course through the kids it spread to the families. And this is the last piece I want to show by Horsto. Yes, of course.
About the bags.
Yeah.
Did the customers receive the bags? And did the person who shopped?
Yes.
So did they know what they had in their hands?
Well, there was, as you see, it was the information, the minimal information, and the website, and of course, and also the receipt. Had a text underneath it, but also not everyone looks at the receipt. But it was, you know, it was also, the message was not in your face, but it was there if you wanted to take it. So the message explained on the receipt, but of course you have to look at it. But of course, some people probably didn't notice. Some probably noticed that this is not a usual bag. Yeah. And it says big action, and in Lithuanian, the akcija is something when you shop, when there's a sale, that's called akcija. So it's also yes, and yeah.
But the recycling memory is there. You take pictures, they go home with it.
Yeah.
You make videos that people go home with
the bags.
So they were given in addition to the normal bags, or like instead?
No, there was only these bags. There was only these bags, and until I think they lasted longer than the biennial, until they were used. They're just these bags.
It will be recycled somehow.
Sorry?
It will be recycled somehow.
Yeah, it will be, and people reuse those bags. Because normally you have to pay, and these were free, so people would normally reuse them. So and maybe they will look at them like in a few days and see that there's something written. So so it was that was my idea of the whole show, to intervene into the everyday lives, so that people. The monuments that are not in your face and not just standing there, that you pass by, something that you have to participate, or you participate sometimes without knowing that you participate in. So that was the idea, to try to make the opposite of the traditional monuments.
And the supermarket was in accordance with you and your aims, and was it like?
The supermarket was so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I was so surprised, because at first I thought they will be against it, and at first I even thought, let's not tell them what it's about. Let's just say that we just want plants, because they will be against it, And they were so for it, and they said, oh, maybe you want also a message on the receipt and everything. They were really very collaborative and very.
So you have to buy something to get it back.
Well, but of course, the biennial visitors only bought like a chocolate or something, but still,
It was a nice chocolate.
Yeah. So.
The biennial was finished how long? 1 month ago?
It was from mid-September till end of November.
And you know what happened afterwards with the places?
With the places.
With the people. You don't follow.
Well, I don't know what happens afterwards. I mean, we tried to leave some of the works there, but some we had to remove. Some tried to stay, but we will see. This is Horsto Heisler and Andreas Knitz are well-known counter-monument artists. Those who started it. Of course, Jochen Gertz as well, but Horst Heisler was the one who proposed when there was the competition in Berlin. Of this monument for the murdered Jews of Europe, he brought in a proposal, which was to destroy the Brandenburg Gate, to grind it to dust and to spread it there. The idea is not to build something new, but to commemorate destruction with destruction, to show that because it's impossible to rebuild what has been lost, so it has to be taken away in order to show that something has been lost. So of course it's an impossible proposal, but its idea is to be impossible and to never be realized, but as it still it exists as a proposal. Here he let's have a look what he did in Rome. Okay, so perhaps there's if you want to see the whole film, it's on Vimeo. You can search the Kona's biennial and you see the rest of the works.
Thank you, Paulina. I think we'll open it to questions if you have. Masha?
Paulina, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation and a very interesting description of the works of the biennial. I have a question about the Grutas part. Because so far it seems like, a symmetry of these monuments, of, certain ideologies. So you were speaking about the new wave of kind of, this anti-Russian attitudes. Which is happening in Lithuania, and for instance in Ukraine it has a very direct and very kind of, I think, also implemented the national policy discourse, with the process of decolonization, how the Soviet murals are being displaced and removed. So what is happening with the Grutas part? Do you think it's going to be there? For how long it will be, existing in this very form that it exists now? Is there any kind of reconsideration of this place? And if this is happening, what kind of formats do you think it might take?
Nothing will happen to Grutas Park. It's a private initiative, it's a business, it's very successful, nothing is going to happen to it, because it's not run by government or anything. And also, it's not a threat, those monuments are not a threat anymore, because they are there, they are not in the centers of towns, they are there as specimens, and there's no thought of being any problem with it, really.
Yeah, but you showed some examples of how some, just public sculptures are being removed. This kind of socialist realist public sculptures. I was wondering whether, there's a certain tendency
There is a tendency to remove from public space because they are considered insulting if they are in the center of town, you know. But if they in Grūtas Parkas, there's nobody sees any problem. And I think that's I think only in Lithuania and in Hungary there are these parks where the Soviet monuments have not been destroyed but put into one location where they are, and I think it's a good thing.
In Berlin also?
In Berlin. But is there a location where they all...
It's a garden that with all the monuments from the Russia.
Oh, really? Ah, okay, because...
I don't remember the name, but there is a park with monuments and things.
It's like a cemetery.
Okay, because I know that some...
No, it's like because they put all together.
Because,
like a cemetery.
Okay, because for example, Lenin, the big Lenin that they removed, they dug it under, they hid it underground, so it's not, you know, so... But maybe some...
Maybe it's in Paco Park. Something I don't remember when I visited.
Okay, but yeah, but a lot of other countries just simply destroy them. So. But I think, as I said, I think that's the point, that they are put away just for people to look at, and it's a good thing because, and there was no really any ideas that they shouldn't be there.
But is there maybe the opposite question, or the kind of continuation? So is there kind of an interest to reactivate, like, let's say, socialist monuments, to reignite, I don't know, Marxist ideas and such?
No.
What is the question?
That also happens sometimes. Huh?
Not yet.
No, not in Lithuania.
Not in Lithuania. If there's a trend or a kind of tendency to reactivate Soviet communist monuments.
It was trauma.
Paulina, but there's one monument in the fort near Kaunas, which is almost like Yugoslavian.
Yes, I had it in this, but then I removed it. I can show it to you.
Please do, because I think it's also unique, and I wonder how come it's so strange in relation to other kind of monuments that you show.
I had it in here, but then I thought maybe it's too much, but I can speak about that 1 second.
So, what can you say about it? Because it's completely different in both, that it's not...
Yeah, it's the only kind of, but it's still not abstract, it's semi-abstract.
Dates to what time?
This is built in the 9th fort, it's built in the 80s, 1980 I think.
Earlier.
Well, I thought earlier, but actually not earlier. I thought that it was earlier. But it was...
I left Kaunas in '73 and it was there.
Really? The information that is given that I've always thought that it was earlier, but I don't know. Well, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And this is the place where the largest numbers of Jews, and mostly Jews, but also other nationalities were murdered by the Nazis, just outside Kaunas. And it's actually very impressive and huge. It's huge, and I only recently noticed that it's a copy of very near copy of the one in Yugoslavia. There's a very similar one.
Actually, maybe the confusion is it was finished in '83, but it took 13 years to build it, to erect it.
Well,
so that's probably the memory you have.
Maybe, yeah, because I have the memory, but it was finished in the beginning of the 80s. Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe it took But it's the only.
So it's one of a kind anyway. So there are not.
There's one of the kind in Lithuania, like that
Yes.
kind of scale, brutalist, made of concrete. It's very impressive. It's one of the kind.
And is it the only monument to the dedicated to the Jewish, or do you have more?
There is a Patriarchy memorial in Vilnius where there's a mass killing place near Vilnius. This is near Kaunas. There's one near Vilnius. That is a memorial, and it has many different small, little, mostly obelisk type of kind of an area with.
So what does it represent, like the Holocaust? Or?
Well, it's not the best photograph. Maybe I can find. It's not even. It's not called like for the Holocaust. It's called for victims of the fascism.
But it's connected to the communist kind of monuments in some way, or not, or completely like.
Whether it's considered no.
So there's no thinking about removing it.
Oh, no way, no, it's not. But no, it's
And one last question, maybe, unless there are other ones. Can you say something briefly about the reaction to the biennial? Because in a way, you talked about a kind of nostalgic feeling towards monuments. You know, for the wider audience, you know, like for what monuments represent or look like today in Lithuania. So this is kind of very different than what happened in the biennial. So if you can say something about the reactions to these kind of gestures.
Okay, one of the reactions.
From the public, from the press, I don't know.
The art community and critics was very positive, a positive reaction. The public, as I said, was very different reaction. You know, a lot of people thought that this freedom statue has been desecrated and everything, and that. But also one of the reactions which tells a lot is that the mayor of Kaunas, you know, was taken around all the works and shown, and very good, thank you very much. And then you saw the horse that I showed, the man on the horse that it was selected for the Lukiškių Square. When it was rejected, he said, "I'm taking it, and I'm going to build it 7 meters high." So, you know. I mean, and another thing, you know, Tadzonish's Lenin in the rented flat. Those people, there were two types of visitors, and that's what I actually wanted to achieve with most of the works. The biennial visitors who had this guide, who had on the internet the map and everything, and they went and another group is accidental people who encountered the work by accident. Whether they understood that it's a monument or whether they didn't, it didn't matter to me, because it was more important to me that they were affected by the work, and that's what matters. Not that this is the monument or this is not the monument, but. So for Tadzonish's Lenin in the flat, those people who came with the ad to rent the flat, and it was in a very good location, so the phone was ringing all the time. None of them even crossed their minds that this is art. So art and life is absolutely separate. You know, people don't connect.
But weren't they asking questions? What is it? Why the fear?
No.
Can I move it?
Can I move it? Yes, yeah. They asked the questions. They said, they were told no. Well, okay, well maybe I can live with it. But it didn't occur to them that this might be an art project. So yeah, I thought that was strange.
Anybody else?
But don't you feel that it may miss in a way a point, you know, of trying to express of all the information, of all the history that you really try to, to underline to these casual, people meeting, the pieces. Don't you think they miss something that they didn't know, the whole information about it?
Even if you had like a massive board with information, there would be people who miss it. And you have to want to find out. You can. I went to the Folsom Triennial. They have these, pieces, of the descriptions. It's very easy to miss as well. If you don't, if you want, you miss. If you're not interested, you.
I'm not talking about science, but for example, with these singers, they were singing, but you don't think that people miss, the context or the,
Yes. A lot of people miss the context, but that was part of the point, really. I mean, for them to suddenly find something that they don't understand, and but it's there, and why is it there? So it's. I wanted to. Of course, it's not ideal, and of course they didn't get the information, but they made it.
This is the point of art,
Yes.
not political art, but
Yes.
art itself.
Yes, and it made.
What's happening, that you don't have any influence. No textual, not explaining. This is the real art.
That's what I thought.
I think.
And I
that
got.
it's not political, that it's not from somewhere, that it's anti everything that was happening there. But I think that this is the mission of art.
That's what I thought, and of course I had a lot of, even from the biennial, director and other people, the ministry, the people who, the producers, I had a lot of, explaining to do, and they still not completely convinced that was the right way to do it without information.
Because there was something very beautiful that you just mentioned about this tragedy of working with kids, and they were like, spreading the information to the parents. So it's a very interesting strategy.
Yeah, so some works were like that, but it spread the information that way. Some works just was there and was spreading the voice, so it was just the voice and the singing. So it was, I wanted to bring different strategies, different work with as different as possible strategies of how to commemorate things and how monuments could be different. So some of them were giving information. Jenny with kids, she had played all these games, with these cards of the percentage of the Jewish population lost in different countries, and they had to choose and to guess which one was Lithuania. So some works, different works worked in different way, but I didn't want. I wanted to make a point that it's not the information that we need, but the emotional connection.
Can I ask something? Yeah, I'm curious about more like thematic issues. So I noticed there are several projects that deal with the Jewish past and the Holocaust. And then I'm interested how you work curatorially to try to map sort of Lithuanian politics and culture, and then say, okay, this has to be dealt with, or did you approach like the objects in the city and map them, or what sort of made you create this map? Was it based on existing conflicts, silenced conflicts?
It's not only about the Jewish history. The monuments were different, were the different other themes as well. But I showed these perhaps because they.
Because we're Jews.
No, actually, no. If I was. No, actually not. Because if I was showing it in another country, I would be showing this. I would be doing this talk as well, because I wanted to point out the more different strategies, really. And of course, I would like to show the whole film, but there was no time really. But I invited artists to come to. I chose artists who work with either with like Horst or Heisel, who I wanted to get really first of all because he works with counter monument. I invited artists who work with public space. I invited artists who work, for example, Jenny Kagan, who has personal connection because her parents were there. So different reasons of why I invited artists. I also invited artists who was from Kaunas, Lithuanian from Kaunas, they're all born there. So then I invited an artist who works with, for example, there's a monument to George Maciunas. The artist works with Maciunas' work, and Maciunas was born in Kaunas. So I
Emma
invited
Goldman monument. Emma Goldman.
Emma Goldman was born in Kaunas. So so different reasons of, and then I invited those artists and I let them look around the city and see what they want to do. Of course, we gave the history and everything, and they chose.
So you chose the artist?
I chose the artist, yes.
From Africa, you didn't invite them?
There was a South African.
African also?
South African.
Not South African, African.
African, no. Well,
this. Very interesting. Okay, the next one.
The next time, I mean, we had very limited resources, and the budget was very small. Really, it's project based, not even government funded. So yes. So to answer your question, and we also did an open call because I wanted, my idea was also to give this initiative to the artists. Okay, the artists hate the conditions of the competitions, and competitions are really crap, and a lot of artists, prop artists interesting artists don't participate because the conditions, So okay, do what you like, no conditions. Choose who you want to make a monument for and how you want to make it. And actually, the open call was a disaster. It wasn't really not a disaster, but it wasn't very good. I only chose one piece from the open call and it was really strange because the artists did not. Some of the artists said, "Oh, it's a pity. It's a very interesting concept, and I would like to participate, but I don't do sculpture." But I didn't want sculpture. But monument is so joined with sculpture that it's, I wanted to separate these concepts, monument and sculpture. But it's very difficult to do, still in the artists' minds even. Other artists proposed something that they normally do, and did not try to investigate, what is lacking, because I wanted the artists to look at Kaunas and see there's certain monuments that we have and there's certain monuments that we don't have. For the massive part of our history there is no monuments, so that's why I wanted to fill that gap as well. So yeah, so that was the strategy. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was more wondering on the kind of political effects, or I was kind of talking about controversy, very interested in the counter monuments, so that maybe entails kind of an oppositional stance towards, let's say, authorities, or monuments were made so far by the state. So
well, that was
your political motivations, maybe.
I wanted something totally opposing the traditional way of monuments, and that was through giving artists the freedom of, doing something which is not a sculpture in the middle of the square or something, So that was, politics come into that as it comes, It wasn't specifically.
Okay. Thank you, Paulina.